Hello there. My name is Brenda Williams, and I'm the founder of Culture Shift Hers Unite. Soul of a Leader, the podcast for she who lives and works from the soul, and the Brenda Williams Show. And I'm super excited to be sharing with you an evolution of a body of work that I believe was born in the body, literally born in the body. And I thought it would be important to name what a culture shifter is and the codes in which a culture shifter lives by. And I think we've seen enough in our world unethical business practices, tyrannical leadership, and silencing of voices that are furthest away from the center of power. So I think it's super important to level set, especially as we're moving into a new year. What is a new way of being that I believe is naturally unfolding? But as it unfolds, how do we arrange ourselves in a constellation of love and support? And I believe that in eras prior, as we're building businesses and leading organizations, it's about sustainability, but saying sustainability solely from a fiscal standpoint. But we have to think about sustainability from a broader standpoint about the body, about centering humanity, and definitely centering those who are, again, furthest from that power center. So, this I want to acknowledge again is part of a teaching series, Culture Shift Her Leadership, Soft Power as Embodied Practice. And so, with that, I want to name this work as formation. This is not solely based on trends or hot takes. I want to reference that this is also part of a Substack series that I'm doing called Avoidance Incubator. And in many times when we're hollowed out, when life hollows us out, we can feel like we're in a void, we're in a vacuum. But the truth of the matter is we're actually in a womb space. And in that incubation and in that void is incubation. So I really want us to slow down and listen. Listen to ourselves, listen to the rooms that we're in, and listen to others. I really want to center that what I am naming has been forming inside of me for quite some time, and I'm not rushing to any conclusion. There's a lot of conversation right now about softness, a soft life, and ease and rest. And while all of those, of course, are super important to the nervous system, but what I want to explore is the difference between the aesthetic softness and embodied soft power. And when we talk about embodied soft power, which bodies are allowed the softness? Yeah. So, what we want to be doing, I believe, is reclaiming soft power and define it without defending. And for the point of clarity, I want to think about soft power is not passivity, soft power is not avoidance, soft power is not disengagement, and definitely soft power is agency exercised with intention. And I really want to contextualize this, that this distinction matters deeply for people who are inhabiting Black bodies, because the system is not set up for Black and brown bodies, queer bodies, aging bodies, anything that's not white, male, cis, wealthy, and able. So what we're talking about is a softness that is not in the hegemonic imagination, because this distinction is so deeply, it needs to be explored, and we have to acknowledge that these systems do not grant sovereignty by default. And agency is something that has to be activated and not awaited. So we need, yes, active allyship. And we also need systemic changes. But that only comes through an evolution in our consciousness. So I want to say this slowly. Soft power requires agency. Soft power requires agency. Sovereignty doesn't arrive by invitation, it has to be activated. And we want to also think about sacred listening and what sacred listening avails us to. And what sacred listening is listening without the preparation of a response. It's the allowance of pregnant pauses. Listening to receive, not to manage. Listening as a presence and not a performance. So what does sacred listening disrupt? Urgency, extraction. What can I get from this? Performative decisiveness. It also grants the gift of empathy, connection, and if done well, transformation for both you and the speaker. So what I'm naming here is not anything novel or new. We notice that this practice is actually done in many indigenous cultures throughout the world. It is definitely a practice of the feminine. And this is how better decisions are made, through the act, the sacred act of listening. So, how do we integrate this? Make it real and not exposed. What we'd like to do is to demonstrate embodiment without oversharing. But sacred listening has shaped our leadership, and specifically, it has shaped my leadership because as an empath, a person that is highly sensitive, I often listen to the room and become a silent observer. I listen not exactly to what a person is saying or what they're not saying, maybe what's absent from the room or absent from the conversation. Slower to respond because not every place and space is meant to hold me. But especially in this season of uncertainty, transition, and discernment, it has influenced how I move, how I decide on the price of my work. And back to the void is incubator. In that void, and I'll just share this briefly, grief will show you what you can hold. In real life, my mother made her transition in 2024. I am a full-time caregiver for a father with dementia and also a very real full-time business owner. And so the void that I was in, instead of thinking that I was buried, I returned to the soil as I'm being planted, that whatever needed to be removed would naturally fall away. I don't want to romanticize the void at all. But when we can readjust our thinking around the hollow, when we look at the global genocides that are unfolding on our planet, when we think about the very scary economic status of where we are in the country and in many parts of the world, the void, the emptiness, the empty space, the abyss can be a great place to be reborn. And so what I utilized was the teachings of some wisdom from our literary ancestors. So I thought about it from the context, what would Audre Lorde teach us about pause? What would we learn from Octavia Butler about seasonality? You know, what could we learn from the gift of poetry of Nikki Giovanni and the literary brilliance of the Black identity in terms of the imagination and possibility, and also lived experiences through the works of Toni Morrison? And that is a Substack series that I am moving through right now. So as I frame this work, what happens when we remove urgency? Discernment has room to surface. That space has been so essential for my own formation. And what I had to do was just go back to the basics. What do I know to be true? What do I believe? What are my values? What do I value? And understanding that as one person, the things that we have all witnessed, we were never meant to see. And we're never meant to carry grief and love, for that matter, alone. And what does that have to do with our leadership? Well, I believe that it invites us into something very important. And this is where the work is going. Presence is the testimony. So let me share this with you as well. This is the first of several Culture Shift Her codes. And this work rests on the embodiment of soft power. And future teachings will explore agency, sovereignty, discernment, boundaries, and vision. And so as I close, the posture is shaping my speaking, my facilitation, my leadership and work right now. And I'll continue naming these codes as we move forward. And as I breathe, I invite you to breathe and think about where you can practice this week. The gift of listening, the gift of witnessing. Listening, yes, to others, but also listening to yourself. So what can you do in your daily practice, in your morning routine, before anything else can grab your attention, before the emails, maybe kids, loved ones, team? How can you listen inward first? And maybe it's through journaling, maybe it's through a playlist, maybe it's simply just through breathing. That you can become an active listener into your own life, to what's not being said, but what's being presented to you, so that you can listen for others of not what's being said, but what's maybe absent from the conversation, or maybe what's being the wisdom that's being applied. And then also definitely listening and paying close attention to those marginalized voices, and how you can use your position, your place, and not that privilege is a dirty word. It is not. But how can we use our places of privilege, even if we're in places of pain, to help move forward and usher in a world that is more equitable and a world that works for all? So I'd like to close with this. Please check in every Wednesday here on LinkedIn for this teaching and the evolution and really seeding and working of the codes of a culture shifter, and how soft power is the foundation. But again, soft power is not simply an aesthetic or something that is nice to have. Softness is also an answer to the oppressive systems that we see in our world, and soft power is agency, and soft power is liberation. So in our teacher this week, Audre Lorde, who is teaching us about the power of pause, one of my favorite quotes of hers is this: "I am not free while another woman is unfree, even if her shackles are different than my own." And we know that the master's tools will never destroy the master's house. But then what would be the tools of liberation the tools of equity, the tools of sustainability. And I believe at first, the very, very first tool that we engage in actively around that has to be around humanity, being human and all of its wonders, flaws, and possibility. So again, my name is Brenda Williams, founder of Culture Shifters Unite, the host of the podcast Soul of a Lead Her for She Who Lives and Works from the Soul, and the Brenda Williams Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon. Please drop a comment down below. If anything here resonated with you, please let me know. And I'm looking forward to engaging you more on this series. All right. Bye for now.